Hello, my name is Nikki, and I work here with Cape Ann, and thank you volunteers for virtually attending. Um, that was my setup for this, so hopefully we'll roll right through it. On a more serious note, two things. One, I'm a millennial, so I'm reading notes off my phone, so I don't forget anything. I think that was actually one thing. That was it. All right. So we're doing, the breakdown is pretty simple. The first is just going to be me talking for a minute. And then these are actually just all different videos. So they're each probably under 10 minutes. So we should breeze right through it. Hopefully they'll segue. You guys might be really familiar with these at the time. All right, so dogs, wolves, and the alpha theory. So I always just like to start here because I feel like this is kind of the top of the pyramid of doggy language. So just some myths. So we've all probably heard of like the big bad wolf. There he is. So the alpha wolf dominates other pack members in order to maintain hierarchical status. Some dogs are born with alpha personalities. Others are born more subordinate, or betas, they're sometimes called. And we as humans must dominate our dogs as direct descendants of wolves so they don't assert their dominance over us. So I don't know, I'm sure everyone's heard things like this, especially in the media. So between the 1930s and 40s, Swiss behaviorist Rudolf Schenkel conducted behavioral studies on wolves. During the studies, he observed the wolves acting aggressive towards one another, and so these are where those myths came from. He theorized that okay, there's a lot of violence within the pack structure, they're fighting one another, they must be forming a hierarchy. And again, this trickles more into the training side of the dog world, I think, but a lot of these myths really directly hit on what we think of dogs, how we handle dogs, what we think we understand about dogs, and therefore how it affects their behavior, how we look at their behavior. And so keep in mind that this started in the 1930s. So the idea of there being an alpha wolf or a dominant wolf was largely maintained among biologists until the 1970s. I'm going to say late 60s. So in the 1970s, world-renowned wolf biologist David Meech had initially helped popularize the alpha theory. And then he noticed a huge flaw in all of the studies since 1930, or at least the vast majority of them. They were actually, all of Schenkel's studies, all of the studies that the biologists had piggybacked off on, were based on unrelated male wolves living together in captivity. So lo and behold, there was a lot of aggression and fighting. So wolf packs in the wild, David Meech was like, why don't we look at what they're actually doing in the wild? And wolf packs in the wild are comprised of familial units, generally consisting of a mating pair and offspring. Sometimes there's different litters of offspring born over different generations. So really the alphas are just parents. There's no fight for hierarchy. There's no real rank other than it's mom and dad and maybe multiple generations of offspring at most. And so that really flipped everything, especially with the alpha theory. David Meech kind of realized, like, all right, alpha, like wolves, there really is no what we think of as alpha as a personality type. So I prefer to take words like alpha and dominance and just kind of, I think they've been so misused in the dog field that I prefer not to use them. But David Meech is coming up next, and he'll let you know how they can still apply. So this is the man himself. And just a quick, awesome tidbit about him, why I'm such a fan, is again, one, he's been studying wolves in the wild since before I existed. And two, he's still in the field, he's still doing this. And where he says that he helped get the word alpha out there, he published a book which sold thousands of copies about wolf behavior. And he put the term alpha in it because this was before he studied them in their natural environment. So when he did go and study wolves, was like, we're all wrong, we messed up, go back. He went back to his publishing company, begged with them to take all of the books off of print, stop printing it, get them off the shelves. It has misinformation and it's doing damage. And the publishing company said no because they were making money. So Enter Caesar Milan.
The term alpha isn't really accurate when describing most of the leaders of wolf packs because the term implies that the wolves fought and competed strongly to get to the top of the pack. In actuality, the way they get there is merely by mating with a member of the opposite sex, producing a bunch of offspring, which are the rest of the pack then, and becoming the natural leaders that way, just like with a pair of humans producing a family. Instead of using the term alpha for a wolf, instead of saying alpha male or alpha female, scientists now tend to call wolves like that the breeding male and the breeding female. And, or you can call them the mother wolf and the father wolf. There's really nothing wrong with that. Those are much better and more accurate terms than the term alpha. Actually, you know, I'm very much to blame for the term alpha being used with wolves. I published a book in 1970 that now has over 110,000 copies in circulation, and in that I labeled the top wolf in the pack the alpha. And I did that because at that time that's all that science knew. But we've learned a lot. That book was published in 1970, and in the 35 years since that time, we've learned an awful lot. One of the things we've learned is that the term alpha is really incorrect when applied to most wolf pack leaders. It's appropriate to use the term alpha in an artificial pack where you know, you might put many wolves from different assemblages together, unrelated wolves and that kind of thing. Then they would form a pecking order or a dominance hierarchy, and you could call the top animal at that point the alpha. But that rarely happens in the wild, if ever. And so, you know, that would be one case where you could use it. Another case is where you have what we call a complex pack, or a pack with multiple breeders. In Yellowstone, for example, there have been some packs that have had as many as 3 breeding females. And in that case, you can call the top-ranking female, who would usually be the mother, you can call that animal the alpha female. But you know, looked at in the perspective of wolf packs in general around the world and all, that rarely happens.
So this is just gonna like pick up and start with her talking mid-sentence. This is Trish McMillan. I shared this video with her permission, but I did cut it out of a chunk of video, so bear with me. Yeah, in the little box up there. So she's going to start talking about how to take notes objectively as opposed to subjectively, and just looking at the dog's body language as a whole. So she shows 2 different boxers, and it's quite comical how 100% different they are. So it's nothing groundbreaking in terms of stuff that you guys haven't seen. But there's a long range in between that's not covered. So just kind of, she's showing the 2 extremes. Just so we can.
That's the same Doberman. You can't just say that's an aggressive dog on the right and that's a friendly dog on the left. They're the same dog, just different contexts. So rather than giving dogs labels, I want to teach you to describe the behavior objectively. So rather than saying that's a happy dog on the left, you might say her mouth is open, her tongue is out, her ears are forward, her eyes are squinty. Whereas the dog on the left, she has a C-shaped mouth, she has wrinkles on top of her nose, her pupils are blown, her ears are back, she's crouched over. So describe the behavior rather than saying that dog's angry, that dog's happy, and that will help paint a picture for the next person, because you might be misreading the behavior, but if you're taking notes on a dog's behavior, try to write down what the dog was doing in a way that it'll paint a picture in my mind. Because if you say this is a happy dog, that doesn't tell me anything. But if you describe what the dog is doing, I'll be able to better interpret what's going on. So one of the spectrums that I look at, probably the most important one when you're deciding how to handle a shelter dog, is where the dog is on the loose versus stiff spectrum. So we're going to give these dogs a number. So if number 1 is as loose and wiggly as a dog can get, the muscles are loose, the tail is floppy, the tongue is floppy, the ears are like, there's just no tension at all. So that's number 1. And number 10 is as stiff as a dog can get. There's the muscles are rigid. The dog is practically unmoving. So here's a boxer standing on his loading dock. So 1 is loose, 10 is stiff. Give him a number between 1 and 10 on where he is. So 1 is loose, as relaxed as a dog can get, and 10 is as stiff as a dog can get. So where would this guy be? All right, we got our numbering backwards. Another thing you can do to decide where they are on the loose versus stiff tail is look at all the little movements the dog is doing. So if you had to count how many times he lifted his paws in that little stretch of video, or how many times his tail hit himself on either side. With a loose dog, you will see lots and lots of little movements. So he's being very appeasing. He's got his ears back. I love the little paddly paws. He's wagging so hard that he's hitting himself. You can see his tail over here, whacking himself on the side. So we've got some 1s and some 2s. I agree this dog would almost be a 0. I can't think. The only thing that would make him look more loose is if his mouth was open, but clearly it's cold out. He's wearing his jacket, so he's probably doesn't have his mouth open just because he's cold. If this was a summer day, he would definitely be panting. All right, I'm going to show you the dog with the same breed, another boxer, but in a very different context. And again, I want you to sort of count in your head how many times he does these little affiliative movements. These are friendly movements that this dog is making. He's saying, please approach me. I really, really want to meet you. So look at the second dog. Again, 1 is very loose, very friendly, very affiliative. 10 is as stiff as a dog can get. So same breed, different dog. So what number would you give him? So very different dog, right? If you had to take each of these dogs out of the kennel, you'd handle them quite differently. Yeah, everybody's giving him a 9. He's given you no friendly signals. And for me, this is some of the dogs that have put the little hairs up on the back of my neck and really made me worry are the dogs who are giving no friendly signals. So he's not doing anything. He's not snarling. He's not lunging at the glass. But the only thing moving are his eyes. So, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to bite you, but he is really stiff and he's really worried. And if I had to take both of these dogs out for a walk, the first one I'd be all like, oh my God, I love this dog, making out with him. And this second dog, I would be very cautious with. I would not be, on the floor trying to make him love me. This is not a dog who's giving me any friendly signals. So even if I'm meeting dogs on the street, if there's a dog, I don't know if they do this in Singapore, but they do it in North Carolina, if there's a dog tied up outside the coffee shop, that first dog, I would totally pet that dog. I tend not to pet dogs I don't know, but that first dog is giving me every signal, please, please, please touch me. This guy, I would give him a wide berth. He is not giving me any signals that he wants to interact. And my friend Ian Dunbar calls these 0 dogs. So if you think about having a counter in your hand and you had to count friendly signals with dog number 1, the counter would light on fire. You'd be clicking it so fast, right? There were so many friendly signals. This one, that whole 30 seconds we're looking at him, there was not one movement. You wouldn't make one count of a friendly signal this dog is giving. So he's what Ian Dunbar calls a 0 dog, and be really cautious with dogs who are like this, who are giving you no friendly signals.
She gets cut off. We were talking the other day too, I think this is worth mentioning in our kind of live staff discussion, that again, these are just 2 different, there's a whole umbrella here of loose versus stiff. And so she was talking specifically about what to look for in terms of, okay, this guy's feeling a lot more relaxed. But also keep in mind dogs, like we had Dominic, who it's not necessarily to say like this dog wants to be shrouded in love. He was the biggest love bug ever, super loose, went on his back often, but a lot of that was appeasement. So it's not really testing if the dog necessarily wants to engage or not, but it is definitely something to be aware of. This is just a cute comic that I think we've all had one of those dogs.
Worth it.
So this is just how to greet a dog safely. Again, 100% a review for you guys. The dog in this video is this woman's actual pet dog, so his reaction's very tolerant and adorable.
When it comes to saying hello to a new canine friend, there are some things humans do that dogs find rude, uncomfortable, and downright scary. Let's review 5 big don'ts for greeting a new dog. Number 1, the hand. Sticking your hand in a dog's face invades their personal space. Notice how Moses turns his head away to avoid. Number 2, the lean over. Leaning over a dog is intimidating for them. See how Moses licks his lips and turns his head? That means he's uncomfortable. Number 3, the head pat. Getting thumped on the head is icky. For nervous dogs, an unknown hand reaching over the top of their head can be scary too. Number 4, the face hold. This super invasive greeting includes lots of eye contact at close range, and holding their face in both hands makes a dog feel like they can't move away. Number 5, the hug. This greeting behavior is also really invasive and scary for many dogs. It's full body restraint at very close quarters. The best case scenario with each of these 5 interactions is that a dog will tolerate but not enjoy them, like Moses. However, many dogs will show aggression, lunging, snapping, or biting to try and create some space for themselves and stop the uncomfortable interaction. And it's a totally understandable response. So please keep pups comfortable and keep yourself safe by following these low-stress greeting guidelines instead. Present yourself with your body slightly sideways. Invite the dog to approach if desired by presenting your open palms. Stay calm and quiet with a relaxed and happy expression on your face. Keep eye contact to a minimum. Gently pet the dog on their back or side. After 3 to 5 seconds, pause to see if the dog re-engages with you to request more petting. Following these simple guidelines gives dogs lots of choice and control over the greeting. They choose if they want to engage, and they choose when it's over. Remember, you should always get permission from the owner and the dog before saying hello. Happy greetings!
I love that dog so much. So just a little reminder of doggy consent. The next video, we kind of bump it into dog interactions with other dogs, but it's all primarily the same things that we're looking at: stiffness, looseness, lip licks.
At the Dog Park, a film series by Sue Sternberg. Please email me at dogparkapp@gmail.com if you have any questions. Visit greatdogproductions.com. Red Alert Behavior Series with a special section on risks to small dogs. Red Alert Behaviors. These are all too common dog behaviors which, when observed, means there's an urgent need for a human to intervene and stop the interaction by walking between the dogs. Owners should get their dogs full attention. The dogs should be given a break. Red Alert Behavior number 1, tail tucked. We're going to be watching a small brown dog with her tail tucked, and she's being chased and harassed here by a black and tan miniature pinscher. There's a woman who will sit down on the bench. You'll see repeatedly the small brown dog will look and make eye contact with the human. It looks to me like she is asking for help, hoping for assistance. Her tail will remain tucked the entire time. This little dog is terrified. Absolutely does not want to be at the dog park. It's easier to see in slow motion. There's her first glance at the woman, and I really think that the dog is seeking some assistance here and hoping for it. They're being approached now by a rat terrier. And in every interaction here, you'll see the small brown dog is backing off, appeasing. She lifts up her front paw. She is avoiding eye contact. She's giving space. And both the other dogs are intimidating her, are taking her space, are just doing to her, and they're ignoring the signals she's giving, and she's trying to get them to stop. And again, she keeps eyeing this human being, hoping for a little assistance. This little brown dog is unable to get her point across that she doesn't want to interact with these dogs and she's afraid of them. And they are bullying her. She has every reason to be afraid of them. And she's likely not appropriate for the dog park at all. Owners need to be on high alert anytime small dogs are mixed with big dogs. The players here to watch are the same small brown dog and a large red husky. And again, our small brown dog has her tail tucked, a red alert behavior. She needs assistance. Right now she's just behind that husky, and the husky gets aroused, and I think she gets aroused in a predatory way. You'll see her spine, head, eyes are all in alignment. She becomes an arrow. High tail, tail up over her back, ears forward. The husky is very aroused and is starting to hunt the small brown dog. And you can see their ears forward on that husky, tail high. Every part of her is forward and erect and aroused. And it's very one-sided. And here the small brown dog is going to do everything in her power to get rid of the husky, and she can't and will not be able to do anything. She is thankfully saved by an interruption from that rat terrier. Again, she snaps here only out of defense. Her ears are pinned back. She's offering every appeasement behavior. She's saying, please, husky, leave me alone. Please, please, please don't chase me. I am not a toy. And it's to no avail. The only thing that interrupts this from turning, I think, very badly is the interruption from the rat terrier. And I don't think it's heroic. I think the rat terrier is looking to pick a fight and very quickly realizes he is in over his head. And you'll watch him lose ground here. The husky gets now attracted to him. Her hackles will go up. That means the hair on the back of her neck. And this is the same kind of chase you'd see if that husky were chasing a rabbit. Very dangerous. Again, there's a freeze frame of those hackles up, that tail up high over the husky's back. She is not playing here. This is a very dangerous interaction. In particular, any game of high-speed chase, in particular when the owners are not close by, the risk of danger and injury and death goes way up because speed kills, speed arouses. Dogs become out of control with speed very easily, and most people don't follow the dogs and can't keep up with the dogs. The closer humans remain to their dogs, the better they'll be able to call the dogs off and keep control.
I sent this to Suniva a while ago, so I don't know if she had you guys watch it before. This is, I think, the best dog video on the internet. It's just very well done. So,
few things are as enjoyable for us as cuddling up with our dogs. And luckily, many dogs love cuddling too. But just like people, dogs aren't always in the mood to be touched. Some dogs are even uncomfortable or afraid of being touched by people. Asking a dog if and when he'd like to be petted can reduce the risk of putting the dog into a situation in which he feels the need to growl or even bite. How do we know a dog wants to be petted? This is where a petting consent test comes in. Petting consent tests allow us to ask the dog, "What do you want?" The first step in a petting consent test is to watch whether the dog chooses to approach you. Never approach an unfamiliar dog and try to pet him. If a dog hasn't come to you on his own, he's already said no thank you. Here's an example of a dog approaching enthusiastically and enjoying being touched. If a dog keeps some distance between you, as in this video, it's a clear signal that he's not ready for you to touch him. If your goal is to ask a dog whether he'd like to be petted, do not use treats to lure him closer. This puppy is staying nearby because the seated person has treats, but you can see that he's not comfortable being touched. The dog has approached you. Now what? The dog's body language will tell you whether and how to proceed. If the dog shows fearful body language or behaves aggressively, don't try to pet him. If the dog has a loose, wiggly body and a relaxed, happy face, as in the next videos, you can try a petting consent test. This dog isn't as enthusiastic in his approach, but isn't showing signs of fear. Sometimes a dog will approach cautiously because he's interested in you or your treats, but he's not completely comfortable. The next videos show fearful or uncomfortable body language, including stiff bodies, ears that are pinned back, tightly closed mouths, tense faces, and lower tucked tails. If you see this kind of body language, any aggressive behavior, or if you're just not sure what the dog is saying, do not reach toward the dog. This puppy's body is tense and his tail is down, while he stretches to get a treat while trying not to move his body closer to the person offering it. This dog's tail is low, her body is slightly stiff, and her ears are back. And this dog's tail is tucked between her legs. The dog wearing the orange leash has his ears pinned back, his mouth is tightly closed, and his brow is furrowed. It's best not to reach towards dogs showing this kind of body language. If the dog has approached you on his own and doesn't appear fearful, aggressive, or conflicted, you can try a petting consent test. Pet the dog briefly, ideally only once or twice, then remove your hand and see what he tells you. Here are a few examples of brief consent tests. Many dogs don't like hands coming over their heads, so petting the chest is a good first choice, but other areas may be fine too, depending on the dog. For those dogs who choose to approach you, but look worried or conflicted, you can make a hand available to them without reaching toward them. Some fearful dogs find touch very comforting, but it's best to let them initiate contact. In these videos, dogs are choosing to move into the offered hand. Notice that the offered hand stays still, rather than moving toward the dog. If the dog does move into your hand, you can then try a petting consent test. After you've petted the dog briefly and withdrawn your hands, watch for the dog's answer. Does he want petting right now? An answer of no comes in many forms, including no behavior change, nervous body language like lip licking, turning away, or looking at your hand, or moving away from you. Here are several examples of dogs saying no to petting consent tests. These dogs don't show any change in behavior, so assume they are not interested in being petted. This puppy stands very still with a lowered tail, pinned ears, then moves away. This is a no. This dog shifts her weight back away from the petting hand. She doesn't want to be touched. Both of these dogs say no to petting by moving away. Here, the puppy stops what he's doing to turn and look at the hand that touched him. He is not comfortable being touched right now. To interpret the answer to a petting consent test as a yes, the dog's behavior should be unambiguous. The dog should be actively soliciting touch. Here are some nice examples of dogs saying yes to petting. This dog moves closer to the person every time petting stops. This is a yes. This shy dog nudges her nose under the person's hand every time petting stops. This dog asks for more petting by pushing her nose under the person's hand. This dog wiggles up next to the person to ask for more attention. And when petting stops, this dog cranes her neck to get closer to the nearest available hand. This dog pushes back into her person for more attention when petting stops. Even if a dog says yes to petting initially, make sure to frequently stop petting and check that the dog's answer is still yes. Here are 2 examples of a yes and then a no from the same dog. This dog initially says yes to petting by pushing her head into the person's hand, but a few seconds later, she looks away, licks her lips nervously, and puts her ears back in response to petting. This is a clear no. This dog also says yes to petting by nudging a hand. But later, she shows no behavior change in response to petting. She's not interested in petting right now. Now you know how to ask a dog if they want to be petted. If the dog approaches you, watch body language to decide whether to try touching the dog. If you do pet the dog, stop after 1 to 2 pets and watch for the dog's answer. Try petting consent tests with your own dog. If your dog says no to petting, try not to take it personally. No one likes being touched all the time. Instead, you can offer a different kind of interaction that doesn't involve touch, like playing with a favorite toy or going for a walk. You can try a petting consent test again later. Taking the time to learn petting consent tests will pay off in the long run. Being able to recognize a dog's answer and respecting his preference will help the dog feel more comfortable and keep you safer.
So I don't know if you guys have seen this one. This is the second best dog video on the internet. And so my purpose of putting this in is 1, just for entertainment because it's really cool information. And 2, why I get so naggy about the decompression walks is just letting them go out and dog and sniff and not have to worry about heeling on the leash. So this is kind of I'll let this speak for itself.
Hi, Bob. Morning, Kelly. The tulips look great. Have you ever wondered how your dog experiences the world? Here's what she sees. Not terribly interesting. But what she smells, that's a totally different story. And it begins at her wonderfully developed nose. As your dog catches the first hints of fresh air, her nose's moist, spongy outside helps capture any scents the breeze carries. The ability to smell separately, with each nostril, smelling in stereo, helps to determine the direction of the smell's source, so that within the first few moments of sniffing, the dog starts to become aware of not just what kinds of things are out there, but also where they're located. As air enters the nose, a small fold of tissue divides it into 2 separate folds, one for breathing and one just for smelling. This second airflow enters a region filled with highly specialized olfactory receptor cells, several hundred millions of them, compared to our 5 million. And unlike our clumsy way of breathing in and out through the same passage, dogs exhale through slits at the side of their nose, creating swirls of air that help draw in new odor molecules and allow odor concentration to build up over multiple sniffs. But all that impressive nasal architecture wouldn't be much help without something to process the loads of information the nose scoops up. And it turns out that the olfactory system, dedicated to processing smells, takes up many times more relative brain area in dogs than in humans. All of this allows dogs to distinguish and remember a staggering variety of specific scents at concentrations up to 100 million times less than what our noses can detect. If you can smell a spritz of perfume in a small room, a dog would have no trouble smelling it in an enclosed stadium and distinguishing its ingredients to boot. And everything in the street, every passing person or car, any contents of the neighbor's trash, each type of tree, and all the birds and insects in it, has a distinct odor profile telling your dog what it is, where it is, and which direction it's moving in. Besides being much more powerful than ours, a dog's sense of smell can pick up things that can't even be seen at all. A whole separate olfactory system, called the vomeral nasal organ, above the roof of the mouth, detects the hormones all animals, including humans, naturally release. It lets dogs identify potential mates or distinguish between friendly and hostile animals. It alerts them to our various emotional states, and it can even tell them when someone is pregnant or sick. Because olfaction is more primal than other senses, bypassing the thalamus to connect directly to the brain structures involving emotion and instinct, we might even say a dog's perception is more immediate and visceral than ours. But the most amazing thing about your dog's nose is that it can traverse time. The past appears in tracks left by passers-by and by the warmth of a recently parked car, or the residue of where you've been and what you've done recently. Landmarks like fire hydrants and trees are aromatic bulletin boards carrying messages of who's been by, what they've been eating, and how they're feeling. And the future is in the breeze, alerting them to something or someone approaching long before you see them. Where we see and hear something at a single moment, a dog smells an entire story from start to finish. In some of the best examples of canine-human collaboration, dogs help us by sharing and reacting to those stories. They can respond with kindness to people in distress or with aggression to threats, because stress and anger manifest as a cloud of hormones recognizable to the dog's nose. With the proper training, they can even alert us to invisible threats ranging from bombs to cancer. As it turns out, humanity's best friend is not one who experiences the same things we do, but one whose incredible nose reveals a whole other world beyond our eyes.
So this one I added in kind of as our group discussion, also as kind of a reminder, a recap of everything we just looked at. So how stiff or loose this dog is, how many times she shows stress behaviors like her body posture is low or she's licking her lip. There's a weird alarm that happens every couple of minutes and I don't know what it is. This video I actually pulled off of a public Facebook page, a Florida dog rescue, and just for pre-context, this dog was supposedly found in the Everglades, so.
You good, Mama? You're okay. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Pretty girl. So, she is getting better, as I said. It's still a work in progress. It's a slow work in progress. But she is getting better about leaving her room and coming out here in the yard. She'll leave her room to go on a walk out front, but she won't do anything on a walk. She won't pee, she won't poop. So we need her to go to the bathroom outside, not in her room. So we needed her to be used to coming out here in the yard. And a lot of work, a lot of patience, but she's getting there. Hi, sweet girl. Hi, sweet girl. Who's a good girl? Who's a good girl? Who's a good girl? And then, of course, whenever she comes out here and she does her business, it's a big old party, and we clap and we praise her like crazy, and we pet her and we love on her and make it like a really, really good experience for her. Right? Right, Mama? You did your potties outside like a good girl. Did you do your potties outside like a good girl? Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Okay.
Okay. This kind of has a couple of reminders. One, everyone, no more baby talking. I'm so guilty of that. That's me all the time. So I'm just kidding. But so I just wanted us to notice again this dog's behaviors. We just watched the petting consent, so I'm not shaming. I can't tell you how many times I've taken my personal dog's face and kissed him on the nose. So I know that we all do stuff like that, but just being mindful. Again, we saw her touching the dog and the dog tolerated it. The main thing though is remembering to perceive things the best we can from the learner's perspective, which in this case is this dog. This dog actually went on and killed a volunteer at this facility. So they still had this video online. This was prior to that happening. And the reason why I added this, and my point is not to be condescending towards the shelter or anything like that, but just I wanted to wrap it up with the crude point of really taking what you see seriously. Could they have prevented this? Not necessarily, probably not. I mean, we see sometimes a truck goes by and my dog does those behaviors. So it's not to say, oh my God, they should have known. These are stress signals. But I just wanted to make a point that they also shouldn't be just totally overlooked. So I also wanted to point out too, again, basing it back on the dog's perspective, was, I want to quote the trainer who said this, but I'm blanking on who did, was rating the type of motivation or praise that you're giving the learner. And so we heard her very happily and genuinely well-meaning, I'm sure, saying how much they cheer and clap and surround this dog and touch this dog and throw a big party. And that dog is telling us, presumably, I cannot imagine this dog being too happy about that. So again, my point of this was not to place blame on another rescue that had an unfortunate incident. It's just that looking at, we see the sweet dog, she did tolerate the petting, she is very stressed, we saw her yawn, we saw her pacing, but how can we minimize the dog's stress? How can we take what we see objectively and seriously, and please don't cheer and pet dogs who do not like cheers and petting. So this is where I threw my 1990s background in. So this can be kind of a discussion. List 3 physical behaviors that indicate this dog is not comfortable. If you guys want to yell them out, you can, or I can awkwardly answer for the camera.
Lip licking.
Great.
Ears are back.
Perfect. So same thing for these 2 dogs. How do we think this is gonna go in this minute?
Nose to nose and stiff.
And very direct eye contact. So personally, I'd be like, okay, let's walk them away. And
Right, really has ears perked, like, you know, wants to go after the other dog. The other dog seems to be a little bit more whale-eyed, ears pushed back.
Great, good job, Megan, our main participator. So
Answering anything else.
I'm gonna lower the volume. So this is back on, we were talking about Dominic. He was like the trophy boy of the tap out dog. So again, just how do we assess behaviors of this dog? Is it, he wants a belly rub, or is he tapping out, which is kind of like, I think of it translated as like an I come in peace, stop touching me. And I thought that this was a good video because it's really not as obvious as our other videos were. He is coming back towards her, he is nudging into her, but then he's still kind of like, Murr. That I would personally still not interpret as, okay, he wants my hands all over his belly. Do dogs roll over for belly rubs? Absolutely. But it's just about kind of context as a whole. So he's definitely engaging, he's wagging his little tail. And then he's doing that lean in the, I think he might flop over another time or two. Typical shelter workers checking the dog's ear.
Is that a tick?
So again, and we look at context. In this context where he's coming back to her on his own, she's not reaching for him, or he, I don't know. And the dog is making the initiation, but then the dog is also rolling over. So again, it could be just a bit of appeasement behavior. Hey, I'm friendly, I really like you, I'm not trying to hurt you. So that doesn't always mean belly rub. What does a wagging tail indicate? Or what might it not indicate all the time? is happiness. So a wagging tail does not always indicate a happy dog. This is another thing that we, one, take into context of the situation, and two, take in context what is the rest of the body doing. Don't just ever look at the tail and be like, well, it's wagging, and then he's growling at you. I have seen people do that and stick their hand into a growling dog's face. So I typically kind of sum it into a wagging tail indicates the dog wants to engage, but not necessarily in a fun way, maybe fun for him. And then looking at each dog's body as a whole, for each dog, note if you would categorize them as loose or stiff. And where we're looking at still photos, could this just be something a little bit out of context? Maybe this dog's having a great time at the park and then he's like, for a second. But based on just the still shot, we're gonna pretend this is the full story. Dog A will be stiff. Yes, good job. Dog B. Stiff. Good job, guys. Dog C. And that is it. Thank you guys for that.